Hello everyone, welcome to another Flesh and Blood video. In this one, we're going to be taking a look at my favorite hero in the history of Flesh and Blood, Iyslander, inside of the LL format. Iyslander received, well, a lot of heroes received a new card, Count Your Blessings in Rosetta, and where personally I don't like the card at all, it is mainly for playing against it. It is a card that's very good inside of control decks, especially one who actually can use resources on the opponent's turn, such as Iyslander Stormbind herself. So with that, let's just get straight ahead and started with the deck list. For those who don't know what Iyslander does, since she is LL in the class constructed format, I will read her. She is a 4 intellect, 36 health elemental wizard hero. She has Essence of Ice, meaning that she can play ice cards in her deck. And she has 2 abilities. If it's not your turn, you may play blue non-attack action cards from your arsenal as though they were instants. And whenever you play an ice card during an opponent's turn, you create a frostbite token under their control. Iyslander's main ability is to put powerful disruptive effects inside your arsenal that are blue. Things like Channel Lake Frigid, Cold Snap, not so much Polar Blast, but it replaces itself, or Ice Eternal, or just really any burn spell, to try and poke your opponent down and control them out. So, towards the end of the game, you can combo them with Stormstrider and your Waning Moon plus her actual ability, putting a good burn spell in your arsenal like an Emeritus Scolding and using the Striders on something like an Aether Hail. This list isn't as conventional as a lot of the other Count Your Blessings decks. Those decks are generally full on all about spells, but this list is a little bit of that Bullander style mixed in. But first, let's talk about the equipment and the weapons. Iyslander's main weapon is the Waning Moon. This is a 2 resource instant that does 2 arcane damage, 3 if it's not your turn, but only activatable if you've played a non-attack action this turn. That's incredibly easy in Iyslander since you get to play blue non-attack actions from your arsenal, especially with 1-cost things like Cold Snap, Polar Blast, and Blue Aether Hail. That'll let you pitch 1 blue to use. In addition to those, Count Your Blessing is another effect that can be used instead of the Waning Moon for 2 resources to help you spend those resources on an opponent's turn whenever you need to spend them. Iyslander's a deck that wants to generally use 1 card in its hand every turn to play your arsenal, defend with 2, and then save 2 cards, and Waning Moon helps you get bonus damage through when the card in your arsenal isn't a burn spell. Moving on to the equipment, the main equipment that works very well with Waning Moon is the Fyendal Spring Tunic. This is because it allows you to use 2 cost effects on the turn. This will mainly be used to play a Waning Moon or a bonus effect, allowing you to use things like Ice Bolt or Emeritus Scolding, and then still get the Waning Moon off. It's very uncommon for you to use the Tunic on something else other than maybe just playing a Cold Snap or Polar Blast on a turn you need to block, so you can defend yourself a little easier, but this will mostly be used to let your 2-cost blue cards you want to arsenal and play on your opponent's turn actually usable the same turn you want to Waning Moon. Mainly use the Waning Moon the same turn you have to play them. The helmet we're playing is Coronet Peak. This is a 2-block Blade Break helmet that has an action to pay 3 resource and make a hero discard a card unless they pay 1 resource. This is just a disruptive effect that can help you if you don't have any aggressive effect on your turn. It's a very good card in Iyslander. We've been playing it for a long time. It also helps you keep Channel Lake Frigid in play since it's an effect that lets you pitch an ice card to it. The other equipment are just some standard wizard things. Metacarpus Nodes helps us on our combo turn, giving us usually 2 extra damage to help kill our opponent, as well as be our main source of AB1. Of course, we are sideboarding in Alluvian Castellas because it's very good, but a very good effect. Again, it helps us it gets us to 4 for Wizard Mirrors, but this is mainly the equipment we'll be playing most of the time, just for the bonus damage. And Stormstriders, which is Storm Striders. I don't have to talk much about them. They have AB2, which is good in Wizard, good against Wizard, and they're mainly going to be used towards the end of the game to just burn out our opponent with a combo. Iyslander's strength is that even though she starts at 36 health, your opponent pretty much starts at like 34 health-ish, around the same as you. And because you have less health, you can take advantage of a card like Wounded Bull, which does have some anti-synergy with Count Your Blessings. However, the way that Count Your Blessings tends to play out in Iyslander is that your life total will be very low and you're using Count Your Blessings to catch back up. But with that, let's just move on to the main deck and talk about those cards. I want to start with Count Your Blessings because it is the new inclusion to this type of list. Count Your Blessings is a 2-cost instant that gives you X life plus whatever based on the color of the card. Red is 3, yellow is 2, blue is 1, based on the number of Count Your Blessings in your graveyard. If you can play all 9 Count Your Blessings in a game, you gain an over 40 life. So decks that can easily run out of damage just can't kill you anymore, which are decks that Iyslander's pretty good against. Decks that can keep attacking you are generally a little slower, which is perfect for Iyslander. So this life gain can keep you in the game against those decks, make it so you don't have to block so you can keep playing bigger turns. We do play 2 attacks in this deck. Enlightened Strike is one that I think Iyslander players might be dropping in some situations, but I do really like this card in this current version of the list. I don't think a lot of the spell lists play it, and this is mostly a spell list, just a few of the attacks, but I think this is a good one. E-Strike, we all know it. You put a card from your hand on the bottom, and then you can either draw a card, give the E-Strike +2, or give the E-Strike go again. All very good effects, and it blocks 3 as well. So if you need to block with it, it's still fine. And then Wounded Bull is a 3 for 7 with 2 block, where when you play it, if you have less life than your opponent, it gains 1 power, making it come in as a 3 for 8. Just a potent damage effect that's really annoying to block because a lot of people don't want to block physical damage versus a wizard. So it can keep you in the game. That's kind of the point of this deck. You want to play a very close game with your opponent, very close on life totals, to use an effect like Wounded Bull to get that little bit extra of an advantage. This is the only effect like this in the deck. We are not on Final's Fighting Spirit. We are not on Scar for a Scar like some of the older lists. Those are being cut down for Count Your Blessings. If you didn't want to play Count Your Blessings, those would be the things I add. I would add Scar for a Scar. I would add probably Command and Conquer, maybe Final's Fighting Spirit, and possibly another blue instead of these. But I think Count Your Blessings is definitely a very powerful card that Iyslander can play. Now that we talked about all of the generic cards, well, except Warmongers, we'll talk about that later. Now that we talked about all the generic cards that are at 3, let's talk about all of the other cards. The most important card in the deck being Aether Icevein. This is probably the best elemental wizard card there is, and it's not good in CC because there's no ice to fuse it with. But this is a 3-cost burn spell that does 5 at red, 4 at yellow, 3 at blue, but we're not playing blue. And if it does damage and was fused, the hero we hit has to discard a card unless they pay 2. An incredibly powerful disruptive effect. We're not playing the blue, even though the blue is playable with Iyslander's ability, just because its damage is a little lacking. Against Iyslander, a lot of decks will bring 3 Arcane Barrier, which means that the blue really won't hit most of the time. We are still getting the card out of their hand, but the power from Aether Icevein comes from when we get the damage through and they have to lose the card. We're also playing Red Aether Hail and Blue Aether Hail. Blue Aether Hail is a very good card to be playing with your Waning Moon on opponent's turns because it also gives a Frostbite thanks to Iyslander's ability. So we're never not including the blue, but I decided to opt for the reds because they do offer a good amount of damage and are one of the better things we can be playing off of our Storm Striders. Our perfect combo turn is a blue Emeritus Scolding Arsenal with a red Aether Hail in hand to play with the Striders. So this is the best spell we can be playing inside of the deck. Aether Hail can take the spot of Scar for a Scar sometimes, so if you didn't want to play the red Aether Hail, you could play the Scar for a Scar instead. I just really like the red Aether Hail. It blocks 3, and it's a nice card that can fuse. It's not a terrible arsenal if you want... Oh, just don't fuse it if you're going to arsenal it, because your opponent's going to know you don't have a blue in your arsenal, but sometimes you have to arsenal it, and it's fine just to sit there for a few turns, and then on a later turn, you either tunic it out just for 4 damage, or you pitch a blue to do it with the waiting mood on your turn for 6. Moving on to the blues, because every other card in this deck is blue. There aren't too many reds in Iyslander, but considering you're a deck that wants a lot of blue cards, a lot of your cards cost a lot of resource, you need blues for all of your effects, it's going to be a lot of blues. Channel Lake Frigid is the premier ice card. It makes everything your opponent does cost 1 more, but you need ice cards in pitch to keep it up. It's very good to be played on opponent's turn because it not only makes their next things they play cost 1 more, but also the next thing, the literal next thing, costs 2 more because of the frostbite you'll be generating. Do be careful playing it on an opponent's turn, though, because sometimes it can be hard to upkeep, but if you can shut out an opponent with a Channel Lake Frigid, and then on your next turn pitch a blue for something like a Wounded Bull, that could be an incredible swing in a game state, and put you straight ahead. Because you'll get to keep the Channel Lake Frigid in play, and you'll be threatening your opponent with the big attack. Cold Snap and Polar Blast sort of fit the same role. Both of them are 1-cost blue ice actions that draw you a card if they're played from Arsenal. Cold Snap is a little more useful, allowing you to freeze the Arsenal or an ally that the target hero controls unless they pay 1, which is more useful than giving your next attack Dominate, especially because you're not attacking on your opponent's turn. Sometimes the Polar Blast can come up if you are doing it on your turn, because you can play it on your turn to still draw the card if you really wanted to, but most of the time you'll be playing it from your arsenal on an opponent's turn to ping with Waning Moon, and then still keeping your card advantage because you just draw a card off of the Cold Snap or Polar Blast played from Arsenal effect. Insidious Chill is another aura that this deck wants to play. It is a 3-cost, 2-block blue. It is ice, that's still fine, you can fuse with it, but it doesn't really feel the best in your hands. The main reason we're on Insidious Chill is because if we draw it on turn 1, it's just absolutely free. It enters with 3 frost counters, and when it has no frost counters, it's destroyed. And when you ice fuse, you remove a frost counter to make target hero discard unless they pay 2. There are only 9 effects in this deck that make an opponent ice fuse, being the 6 Aether Ice Veins and 3 Ice Eternals, but even 1 trigger on Insidious Chill can be game changing. Against faster decks, I sometimes find myself taking this out because drawing it on not turn 1 could be a death sentence, but versus the slower matchups, or even the mid-range matchups, drawing this card incredibly early is absolutely game-winning, making Aether Ice Veins twice as effective, as well as you make your opponent do this before they pay for Arcane Barrier, which means they might lose a card that would save them and make them lose even more cards from Aether Ice Veins' damaging effect. Ice Eternal is the last fusion card in this deck. This is an Iyslander specialization and is an elemental wizard action. It's blue and costs double X. And it also has Ice Fusion. I think I already said that, but you create X Frostbites under target hero's control. So every 2 resource you put into this, you'll generate 1 Frostbite. And if it was fused, you do arcane damage to the enemy hero based on the number of Frostbites they control. A big disruptive effect that can possibly make an opponent not able to do anything with the amount of frostbites you give them, is incredibly good at ending out a game if you stack up multiple frost hexes, something you'll really only do versus slower decks that won't threaten you as much, but Ice Eternal is a very powerful finisher versus those decks, and can be a great disruptive tool versus the aggro decks as well as it blocks 3 and is a blue. Ice Bolt is just a 2-for-3 arcane, good when you have Tunic up, but it's an Ice Wizard card, so you kind of have to play it. There aren't too many of them. Frosting is at 3 in a lot of Iyslander decks, however, I'm only opting for 2 of it. Personally, I find this the worst of the base Ice Wizard actions, only coming in for 1 damage. Yes, it's free, but you don't mind pitching to use some of your other effects. I don't like this card personally. I think it's, again, the worst of the three, Aether Hail, Frosting, and Ice Bolt, but it definitely does have a spot in this deck for now, while we don't have the most amount of Ice Wizard actions. The last Ice Wizard card in the main board is Frost Hex. This is the other Iyslander specialization. It's a 3-cost Ice Wizard action, and it's an Affliction aura, meaning you're playing it under your opponent's control. And then it makes Frostbites you have, so your opponent has, because they control it. At the beginning of the end phase, deal 1 to you, the opponent who has this, which pretty much means when Frostbites go away from not being paid, the user will take 1 damage. Good, again, with Ice Eternal. If you can stack up multiple Frost Hexes, each Frostbite will deal 1 per Frost Hex. So if you have 2 Frost Hexes in play, and they end the turn with 5 Frostbites, they're going to take 10 Arcane, which is really good. Especially into a lot of the slower decks, because sometimes they just can't pay for the Frostbites, and they will just die. The last 2 blues in the main board are Murda Scolding. This is a 2-cost, 3-block wizard action. It does 2 arcane to target hero, but if it's played during an opponent's turn, it does 4 instead. Just a really powerful burn spell. The best thing we can play from our arsenal for raw damage. And then finally, our 1 copy of Warmonger's Diplomacy. This would see more play inside of Iyslander. However, in LL, it is limited to 1, which means we only get the 1 copy. Iyslander is the deck that uses this card the best, not because we play a low amount of attacks, which there are technically decks that play none, even Iyslander decks that play none. Warmonger's Diplomacy is playable during our opponent's turn thanks to Iyslander's ability, which means our opponent has to play the guessing game of will they have a turn capable of war or peace, where we know our exact hand going into the next turn, sort of flipping the script with Warmongers. Normally when it's played, your opponent gets to see the resources they have available to make a decision based on if they want to choose war or peace. But thanks to playing it on our opponent's turn, we are the ones who have that opportunity. Most of the time we'll be saying peace, but sometimes, of course, we will be saying war if we have a winnable or an enlightened strike. Just an incredibly powerful card. Sucks it's limited to 1, but if it wasn't, LL would just be 3 of these in literally every deck. Finally, let's talk about the inventory, starting with the 2 equipment. I do have notes prepared for these if you were in need of them, but I'll run over everything really quick. Alluvian Constellas will come in versus arcane damage matchups, because preventing with 2 with this and then coming into the Waning Moon is a lot more efficient than using Tunic. Stonewall Gauntlet is here for any deck that plays a large amount of power increases for their attacks and wants to go very wide. Sink Below is for decks that it can block very efficiently into, decks that play a lot of breakpoints mainly. Amulet of Ice is for decks that are a lot slower. The no block on this card makes it really bad into aggressive decks, but into slower decks, it can be a pretty much extra Ice Eternal trigger, or not Ice Eternal trigger, sorry, Insidious Chill trigger. Blizzard is going to be good against aggressive decks. Even though it doesn't block, it can generate a Frostbite during an opponent's turn, and it can remove Go Again, pretty much making them need to pay a full blue to stop this card from ending their turn. Brain Freeze is another card really good into the aggressive decks. Weaker into some that don't play as many 0-cost cards, mainly Brute, but into things like Ninja and Runeblade that play a lot of 0-cost cards, Brain Freeze can be a very good disruptive effect against them. Energy Potion is going to come in again versus the slower decks. These are going to be the decks that you want to do a higher amount of Ice Eternal combo into, because the Energy Potion will generate you an extra Frostbite for the Ice Eternal, since every 2 resources, 1 Frostbite. You'll mainly bring these in as well versus something like a Wizard Mirror, because you'll most likely, since you have 4 AB, get enough time to set up the Energy Potions to do a bigger turn or protect yourself. Scour is going to come in versus any deck that wants to bring in a lot of aura tokens or 0-cost auras. These will mainly be decks like Chain, because you can reset all of his Soul Shackles and do a big amount of arcane damage to him. Or a deck like Prism, where you just destroy all of their Spectral Shields, because they're going to be trying to set up a bunch of Spectral Shields. And then the last card is Hypothermia, only at 1 copy, because again, it is limited to just 1 copy. This is another Affliction aura, and it's very powerful again, because we can play it during our opponent's turn. It says attacks you control can't gain Go Again. You'll want to bring this in versus decks that have a lot of effects that gain Go Again. Not things with a lot of base Go Again. Any deck that plays a lot of base Go Again, you're better off just bringing in Blizzard and Brain Freeze. But against a deck that generates it a lot, a deck like Katsu possibly, or maybe something like some of the newer Rune Blades, a lot of their things will be generated Go Again. Hypothermia is an incredibly powerful card that can just straight out end their turn, and it's not something they can just pay for like they can for a Blizzard. So this card at 1 does make sense, and at the beginning of the end phase it's destroyed, so they only have it for the 1 turn, but it's still a very powerful disruptive effect that is limited to 1. The main board of the deck was 54 cards, which means you'll be adding 6 most of the time. Don't feel bad about going above 60, because we are a deck that wants to play for the long game, especially because we're on 9 copies of Counter Blessings. The only card I would ever actually cut in any matchups would probably be Insidious Chill versus the incredibly fast matchups. Instead of the Insidious Chill, I would want to play 9 cards added, and most likely be Brain Freezes, Blizzards, and Sink Belows, and then possibly adding in a 10th card for the Hypothermia if it's a matchup I'd want it against. Also, Hypothermia is good against Chain. That's pretty obvious, I think, but I wanted to mention that because I feel like someone might not bring it in. And you do want it against Chain. Same as Scour. Chain, you do a little bit different of a sideboard. You want Scour, Hypo, Blizzard. Not so much Sink Below versus Chain. I'm not going to write that specifically in the notes, but you'll figure it out as you go along. But with all that, that is going to be the end of the video. I wanted to make this one a little bit faster because I've already talked about Iyslander a bunch on this channel, and we are getting hunted very soon. A lot of the ninja cards have been shown. A lot of ninja cards look really good. Some of the warrior cards look really good. I think Fang and Syndra are definitely going to be pretty powerful this format if they can generate enough inertia tokens to get their abilities online. Syndra needing a large amount of draconic chain links and to make things draconic, as well as Fang just needing 3 inertia tokens to actually do, or not inertia tokens, whatever the tokens are called. I don't remember. Oh, no, they are inertia. Are they inertia? I don't remember what they're called. The new draconic tokens, you need 3 of them in Fang. Arachne doesn't have the best cards shown so far, but I think Arachne is the one deck that doesn't need the best cards shown because the assassin card pool is already so good. At least the stealth assassin card pool is already so good since you get Codex and the really good contract things, and stealth has a ton of support. So Arachne just needs a way to mark. You got 1 card that maybe can do it, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. I really like what they're doing with the 2 new draconic heroes, though. So ready to wait and see what the rest of the set is. If we don't have the full set by next week, we will probably go over another deck list. I don't know what it will be, but I will have to wait and see. Other than that, after that, we'll probably have the whole set, which means we get started with set reviews. I don't know how I'm going to split it up. Most likely it will be the draconic cards alongside the ninja and the warrior cards, and then after that it would be all the assassin cards plus all the other stuff. It depends what. I think assassin's the first thing. Like the number 1 card is assassin. So that would be weird to split it up that way. I'll have to see when we get the whole set. But I'm probably not going to end up doing it in one video. But with all that anyway, this is going to be the end. I hope you all had a good day, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.